You can see the problem crystal clearly in the scene where Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly are making out, and she's kissing him, and the whole time he's kind of mumbling to her about Thorwald, and he's more interested in the fantasy life, the murder across the way. I say it's fantasy, because of course at the end of the movie it turns out it's true, but at this point in the movie we're not sure if Thorwald's even committed murder, and so it's very much it's like a fantasy realm. He's imagining that Thorwald has committed murder. Turns out he's right, but for most of the runtime of the movie we're unsure if Thorwald has done it, and so but he's more invested in the fantasy. The most beautiful woman in human history is making out with him, and he's sort of mumbling during kissing her about how did Thorwald cut his wife up into little pieces. So the relationship is saved by the murder investigation. They were bickering in Act 1, but in Act 2, the two of them are together arguing with the cops, saying, we think he did it. When she joins him, because at first she's like, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're spending too much time in this apartment alone, but when she's like, oh shit, I think you're right, look at her purse and her suitcases and her jewelry, and I think maybe you're right, he looks at her with love. For the first time in the movie, he's excited that she's with him because she's joined him in his fantasy world. You might imagine someone who watches pornography and the person in the and then they get involved with a real person who does not seem who they keep neglecting. What if the person would watch the pornography with you? That would be a powerful moment where the fantasy world that you're so invested in, sort of a fantasy world, and then someone comes along with you. That's what Grace Kelly is doing. She's joined him in his fantasy world, and in a more dramatic way. And that's why the two of them are so crushed in the middle of the movie when it seems like Thorwald didn't commit murder. Because it was the thing that she says, I can't believe we're so unhappy someone is not dead. But imagining a dead body over there was keeping their relationship happy and healthy when it was just about to collapse. And so and so they need the fantasy. In fact, there's even a split second where the two of them, when they think Thorwald is maybe innocent, because the cop says, everything's fine, he didn't kill anybody, the two of them try to get invested in another fantasy. They start watching, just for a little bit, they watch Miss Lonely Hearts. They see her go on a date, she gets dressed up, she goes on a date, and then the guy is like really pushy with her, and she slaps him and she cries. And they watch this other story because they're looking for something else to watch together, like finding a new TV show to watch as a couple. But the Lonely Hearts story is too sad, partly because it's about an unhappy relationship. And they're in an unhappy relationship, and so that's not it's not an escape fantasy for them. The murder was an escape fantasy. It was a more exciting world of bloodshed and saws and dead bodies. And then it's why, crucially, in the third act, when she's like, oh, I think you're right. And what changes in the... Oh, there's another key moment I should mention also. She tells him show's over, and she closes the windows. Notice, just calling it a show draws attention. It's like a movie. It's like a play. It's a fantasy thing. She says show's over. And then she says she's going to put on a show for him. And she mentions doing the Dance of the Seven Veils, which is like a stripping thing. But she says, she takes out her negligee and says, a preview of coming attractions. So she's saying, this show outside your window is over. I'm the next show. But he's not really interested in that show. And it doesn't, partly because he cannot have sex. That can't be the thing. The murder is easier for him to enjoy because he can investigate a murder, but he can't have sex. So she tries to join him on the Thorwald fantasy, and it works, but then Thorwald maybe is innocent. Then she tries to join him in Lonely Hearts, doesn't work. She tries to close the windows, but then they talk about it and they get invested in, like, you know what, Thorwald did do it. And here's where the movie really shifts in Act 3. What makes Act 3 amazing, and what makes Act 3 really different, is that the two of them have been watching the same fantasy world across the way for Act 2. But in Act 3, Grace Kelly does something amazing. She walks over into the fantasy world. She enters Thorwald's apartment. At which point, no longer it was intimate enough when they were watching the same fantasy. But for her to go into the fantasy world, he's watching her in Thorwald's apartment through binoculars. It's like now she's become a cast member in his favorite television show, or she's actually in his favorite porno movie. So he starts acting crazy. One of my favorite little bits in the movie is when she's in his apartment. He whispers, "No, Lisa, get out of there, Lisa, get out." She can't hear him. Who's he talking to? Well, no one. But what's amazing is that's exactly what you do when you watch a horror movie, is you whisper advice to the main characters, and you're like, look out, he's right behind you. Like, they can't hear you. Um, so he treats her like something in a show, like something in a movie, even though he knows she can't see him, but she's entered into that fantasy screen. Um, but it also makes him deeply love her. The fact that she enters into the fantasy, that the fantasy that matters to him also matters to her. So much so that she's willing to put her life on the line to kind of find out about it. She's really good at it too. She gets over to the apartment and she looks in the handbag. She's so excited and happy to have found evidence for him, because this is the thing that is saving their relationship. This is the thing they're doing instead of having sex. They're investigating murder. Um, cool. Let me see what else I got here. All right, cool. Yeah. She wants to be a part of his life. And if his life is going to be the fantasy world, then she's going to try to join him in that life. Again, just to more references to sex, but just like if you had a particularly specific kink, the right person for you is the person who, when they find out about the kink, they're like, oh, I'll do that with you. You have somebody, you've got a match. Now you got, so his kink is looking out of the window at people, and she's willing to join him in looking, but she's also willing to go over there and be looked at, which I think is a really important thing. And he's so happy, and she's sort of so excited. He's sort of so excited about it. Okay, home stretch, guys. So the key scene in the movie then. Um, um, the key scene in the movie is when she goes over to Thorwald's apartment. Um, is when she goes over to Thorwald's apartment. Um, sorry, hold on a second. I'm almost, yeah, and she goes over there and she points to the ring. Again, remember that the key symbol in the movie is the wedding ring, the Thorwald's wife's wedding ring. But of course, wedding is the issue for both. The marriage is what they've been fighting about. Can they be married? Can they be a couple? The key moment in the movie, though, and when I see it with students, they often freak out and yell. And I hope you yelled at your house when it happened. Thorwald sees her pointing at the ring, and then he looks at Jeff across the way, and it is a stunning fucking moment. It's a stunning moment. Why? Because the whole movie is about voyeurism. It's about looking. He's been looking, but he's not, he can see them, but they can't see him. When Thorwald looks at Jeff, it changes everything, because now he's looking, and the person he's looking at is looking back for the first time. And it's never happened before. He's been looking the whole movie, and no one's ever seen him up there looking. And now someone sees him, and that changes everything. It's also, camera placement is amazing here. It's one of Hitchcock's great ideas about where to put the camera. He puts the camera exactly where Jeff is, so that when Jeff's looking at Thorwald, right? Thorwald sees her with the ring, and then he looks directly at Jeffries across the way. He's now the guy that wanted to see and not be seen. Thorwald's looking right at him. But here's the thing: he's also looking directly into Hitchcock's camera. This is crucial because you, the movie audience, are the ones that wanted to see and not be seen in the dark in the movie theater. And when Thorwald looks at Jeffries, because of where Hitchcock's placed the camera, it feels for a hot second like Thorwald's looking at you. Like he knows you've been watching this whole time. You like to watch but not be seen. Jeffries was doing it for fucked up sexual reasons. Are you doing it for fucked up sexual reasons? So he sees that this is a huge moment in the film, because it crosses this barrier, and that barrier, the fact that he's been invisible the whole movie, Jeffries, is like the defining feature of the whole project. Cool. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna do one more video, and then we're gonna be done with Rear Window. I don't want to race through the end of it, but basically I think that's it. And I've gone through the movie pretty good. Okay, I'll talk about the final things in the last video, and then we'll be done.